Okay, here basically I am summarizing the electron proton scattering starting from low energy onwards. Now for low energy basically we have elastic scattering, and here you see we have started our discussion from the classical Rutherford scattering, then we slowly introduced spin, then we slowly introduced recoils, right, mass and other concepts, and then we arrived at the Rosenblatt formula. Now remember, these are all theoretical. Then again, in case of elastic scattering, when comparing with experimental data, we introduce this GE and GM form factors, and then we discussed about how we can experimentally get the proton charge distribution from this GE and GM from experimental data. Right now, slowly going to higher energy, we will have inelastic scattering. Okay, first elastic scattering, then slowly inelastic scattering. Now, in case of inelastic scattering, we will be discussing about several Lorentz invariants. But remember, in this entire discussion, what is paramount important is the scattering cross section. Here, to give you a basic idea of how to write down the scattering cross section, I have discussed these three basic cross sections. Then you remember, in experimental case we introduced G and GM. Now this was for elastic scattering cross section. Similarly, for inelastic scattering and later on for deep inelastic scattering, that means even more higher energy, we will have a similar scenario of experimental cross section, where instead of GE and GM, we will be using some other thing known as form factors. This we will see today, and later on, after comparing with experiment, in case of deep inelastic scattering, we will obtain two very important, you can say, results. One is Kellan-Cross relation, and another is Jordan scaling. Later on, we will also talk about scaling violation as well. So basically, this is the entire outline of electron proton scattering which is covered in our syllabus. Okay, starting from low energy to high energy. Remember, our main morale of this course, this short course here, is to introduce you to this experimental cross section. This is the most important thing. And here I am just briefly discussing about these things. In this particular class, I have not derived these relations. This you have already derived in your previous quantum and advanced quantum mechanics classes here. So this is my actual stuff. This is the heart of this entire course, you can say. This cross section experiment, how to write it down, how to analyze this experimental cross section, why we have written what we have written. Okay, and later on, then we will continue the same expression in case of inelastic scattering, and then from there we will discuss of these two relations, Jordan scaling and Kellan-Cross relation. And from these two relations, we will be able to talk about the structure of this proton. Okay. What can we say about the structure of the proton? You will see that these two particular relations tell us greatly about this structure of the proton. Okay.